So I actually know all of you guys, but because there is going to be a replay and there were people who signed up who I don't know, I'm going to do like the formal introduction, even though it seems kind of weird since I know you guys. But it does feel kind of important because I'm not going to be arrogant enough to think that everybody knows me because that would be super weird. So I am Seryna Myers. I'm a sacred transformation mentor and a certified spiritual life coach. And I have worn many hats in the time that I have been a coach. And my primary focus, and I feel like everything that had been kind of like pointing me in this direction, but I was really resistant for a very long time, is in really helping women navigate into their next level. So this is people who've had big life changes. So it could be like a promotion. It could be actually losing a job. It could be divorce. Loss is another one. Kids moving away and empty nesting, all of these kinds of things where these big, often quick life changes that leave you in this space of, okay, well, who am I now? And when you have an idea of who you're stepping into, how do I become her? How do I bridge the gap between where I was and this woman that I want to go into? And it has this feeling of like these big shoes to fill. And that can help us to sort of like regress into like our past patterns and really fall back into old habits and all the ways that we were being before that stopped us from stepping into our next level of greatness in the first place. And so the goal is to be able to keep kind of building that forward momentum. And that is why we are here today, is to kind of talk about the 3 key areas that I feel are really essential to not just make that leap, but to do it with ease and grace. Because in the last 15 years that I've been doing inner work on myself, I would say very few of my leaps have been graceful. I've been more like, I don't even know, I can't give you a colorful analogy, but it has been clumsy and awkward and sometimes painful. And I know that it doesn't have to be, because in the last 6 months, I have really approached growth in a very different way. And I've really taken the time to do it in a way that is actually really gentle and guided. And so that is what my hope is for you, is that if I can share everything that has, taken me like this Sisyphusian, like rolling the boulder up the hill for the last 15 years, if I can save you a lot of that time and effort, that would make me absolutely happy. Okay. So if you're finding yourself now in this place where you're recalibrating to this new level, where you are stepping into this new way of being in this new space of possibility, and you're now in this place where you're trying to figure out, okay, this is new territory. I haven't been here before. What do I do? In theory, this is actually like a really exciting place to be. And in some ways it really is. However, oftentimes the things that we will do with that space and that potential that we thought we were going to do at the beginning, especially if we were doing a lot of manifesting work to try to call that in the first place, is not actually what we're going to want to do when we find ourselves there. In the time where we're doing this manifestation work and we're trying to call these things in, whether you're journaling, meditating, vision boarding, tapping, affirmations, whatever your process is, if you're doing this work to call these things in, oftentimes you're focused on what you think you want. And there are times where it will actually be what you want, but oftentimes we are so conditioned to be something, have something, do something that would make us successful or, Instagram worthy or admirable. We do so much for this like internal validation and this external social status, oftentimes unconsciously. And so we start to pursue these things that in theory were not actually what we wanted. So I know a conversation I had with someone recently, she was talking about a house and she was doing all this manifestation work about, I really want a big house. I really want a big house. And she got a big house and she was like, oh, actually, I would rather have something characterful. I would really rather have something cozy, because she was finding that all the space felt like she needed to fill it up with stuff. She felt that it was really cold and she didn't have like the warmth and the intimacy that she was actually looking for. But in her head, before actually getting there, this idea of like the big house, that was a success measure. And so she worked all this time to like call this into her life and to do the things that would like get her into that space, only to find out that it's not what she actually wanted. And in a similar space, like with our house, I found the idea of like the blank canvas being kind of debilitating. We bought this house that had no landscaping. It's kind of a random thing, no landscaping. And instead of going like, oh, this is great, I could do this, I could do that, the I could do this list was so huge that I actually found myself really paralyzed in being able to like choose a vendor, decide on a design, like even to just being able to allow myself to enjoy the possibility of what that space was going to provide. And initially, that was actually really daunting. And I felt this pressure to get it right. And we do that because we don't want to waste our time, our money, our energy. We don't want to be disappointed. We don't want other people to know that we didn't get it right the first time. So this pressure on ourselves to do things right and to do things perfectly can be really hindering for us to be able to move forward and step into those next level ways of being. And so when you think about women, we tend to be, and I'm speaking generally here, but we tend to be chronic overgivers. We are the nurturers, we are the social glue of our families and of our social networks. And we, because of that, like that role is really important. So we also need to find ways to keep ourselves filled up and inspired. And we do that by calling in the right things and pursuing the right goals so that we are keeping the cup full. So long as we are the ones who are holding everything together, we can't be continually being in this state of like overgiving and overserving and not actually having a relationship with reciprocity. We need to have this give and take in our ways of being. And we actually need reciprocity to kind of be the basic standard. Like that's just a given. That's not like some big idealized way of being. Like this is just like the bare basic. And so when I'm talking about that, I'm saying that you are paid fairly for the work that you are doing in the world, whether you work for yourself or whether you are an employee somewhere, where you have, where you are able to have boundaries so that there is time and space and energy for the things that light you up so that you're doing that work of filling the cup. And also, so you're just actually enjoying yourself. I don't think we put nearly enough emphasis on the importance of just prioritizing pleasure and having a good time and enjoying what we're doing. We end up being caught up in this mentality of like how, you have to work hard for something to be worth it. And so then whenever something is easy, we can't recognize how valuable it is. Or when something comes to us easily, it's even hard to just sit back and appreciate it because there's like a guilt and this pressure that it should have been harder to get to that place. Do you know what I mean? Let me see what else I'm missing here. Confidence to ask for the things you want. This is probably one of the biggest things that happens in the power dynamics with chronic overgivers and the people that they love. Sometimes it is confidence, and sometimes it's also just giving themselves the permission to say, these are the things that I want. This is how I'm feeling. This is what I desire. And I love the distinction between like want, need, and desire. Want and desire are a little bit closer, but I feel like desire is like want turned up. It comes from like a deeper place. Whereas need, again, that's where we're talking about the baseline. Need is like, I need air, I need a home, I need food, I need like sustenance. But we can set the bar higher than that. Like we don't have to keep ourselves locked in these like less shiny, lower vibrational ways of being when we came into this life to be purposeful and to pursue so much more. And we can't do that if we don't actually allow ourselves to tap into this area of desire. So all of this is to say we need to do some clarity work to get really clear on what the desire is, like truly, versus what we have been conditioned and spoon-fed and told that what we want. Now, the other part of this is that, chances are, if you are in my circle, you have been doing some work on yourself. And it may also be in a place where when you have this opportunity of expansion, you start off wanting to pursue the things that you always thought that you would want to pursue, but you're not her anymore. And so sometimes ends up this feeling of like guilt, or that you're doing it wrong because these things are no longer resonant, when in reality, the person who desired those things doesn't actually exist anymore, because you've changed and grown and evolved, and your desires are going to change, evolve and grow with you. And you need to give yourself permission to want different things and to not feel bad about it. But like more than that is to also say like that it is okay that your desire or your goals or your dreams have shifted. You're not a static being. So we're not going to expect you to like sit down and do things in this just like single one way. And, with that, it also means that sometimes we're not going to actually know like what that's going to look like. And we have to do a little bit of trial and error. But this is where when we have, we're going to go through a process in a moment together. But when we can get clear on not just what the desire is, but like what is like more deeply embedded within it, it becomes so much easier to focus our efforts into pursuing the correct things. Okay, so given all of that, we are going to have a couple of moments together where we're just going to do a guided process so we can get truth into one desire. Not all of your desires, but we're just going to hone in on one thing right now. So I'm going to invite you to close your eyes or soften your gaze, whatever feels safest for you. And just for a moment, just be with the breath. And feel it expanding in your chest. Feel how it moves within you. We want you to be really present with the breath because we want you to stay anchored here in your body. I'm going to get you to direct your attention into your heart center. So I don't mean like your beating heart, I mean like your heart chakra. And in this space, there is this crystalline cave. And we're going to call that the chamber of your heart's truth. And when you're engaging with things in this space, you might get the information in different ways. You might just know the answer to the things I'm going to ask you. You might get a memory back. You might see something play out. You might hear something or have a sensation. However, you're going to get this information is exactly right. And we are going to call two beings to join you in this space. We're going to invite in your inner child and your highest self. And we want to have them as almost advisors in this process, because one of them is tied to everything that has gotten you to this point. And she's holding on to some of that conditioning and some of those big feelings. And so she's going to have a vote. And your highest self is very much linked to the direction of where you're going. And she knows the wisest parts of you. She can see well beyond what is visible to you right now. And so we're going to look at these two aspects of you as advisors to these questions. So the first is, what do you desire from your next level? And I want this to be as specific as you can. And again, this is a pretty big question, so trust however it presents itself to you. So of those things that you desire, I'm going to get you to focus on one of them that feels the most immediate. And of that desire, we want to know, what is the desire behind the desire? So with the example of the woman who was manifesting the big house, maybe it had nothing to do with the house. Maybe it was about having roots somewhere, or security, something that couldn't be taken away. What is the desire behind the desire? And this is where asking for input from your advisors will really help. And the last question is there anything else that you need to know about this? And we're going to be exploring stuckness and beliefs next. But there may be something in that realm that presents itself. Again, a memory might come up. Is there anything else you need to know? And when you're ready, come on back. If there's anything you need to jot down, then capture that right now. But this exercise in stopping, breathing, being, and then tuning into desire rather than trying to intellectualize it is so important. Because when we're actually in that heart space, when we are tapped into our truth rather than our conditioning, we get to find deeper levels that we just wouldn't have access to otherwise. And we would never even think to ask those questions normally. So a friend of mine used to every year host something called the Prosperity Game, and it's based on Abraham Hicks's teachings. And each day for a month, you get like these virtual dollars, and you have to spend them before the end of the day. And every day, the dollars go up. And by the end of the month, you have like gajillions of dollars that you need to spend. And it is so revealing in this process of like, do you feel like you need to give it all away? And in that giving it all away, is that because you don't deserve it? Or is it because you really like, this is the world that you want to live in and you're trying to further these causes? I know for me, there were so many things that I thought that I would want. And then when our whole life blew up in the most amazing ways last year, I don't think I actually bought like 90% of the things that I had thought would be like these pressing needs, because they were sort of like superficial desires. Because even though I was doing this process every day of sitting going, okay, great, how am I going to spend this money? How do I tap into this wealth frequency? I wasn't actually like tapping into my heart's truth. So it was like an energetic and intellectual exercise, but it really needed to be an emotional one. So before we move into the next level, does anybody have any questions around the importance or the process of doing this kind of inventory, this clarity check before we start to pursue things?
I actually do. And I think if I may,
yeah,
you just hit on it with the heart's truth and being the intellectual versus the emotional, because I feel like everything. So my husband retired, which means our financial situation took an extreme change, and my imperative is the word that I've been using for 2 years since he said he was going to retire, and he just retired last month, is to replace his income. And I have failed dramatically at even maintaining what my income was before. So everything is at this intellectual level of my desire is financial security. Like that is all I can come up with, but that's not a heart desire. That's, I don't, like, so I'd love to just know, how do you get past that intellectualization? Because if I'm being informed by financial security, then my decisions are so limited to following paths that will make the most money, which is not my heart, right?
And that's also intellectual.
Yeah.
So I found myself in a really similar place. And first of all, congratulations to your husband. That is super exciting that he's able to be like, okay, cool, that chapter's closed. Now what? And retirement is a perfect example of that blank canvas energy. So I get it. For me, my wife really did not want to be doing her job. She was really miserable. She developed debilitating anxiety, and she's an artist. So she really just wanted to be in create space all the time. Like that's the energy she wanted to be in. And I had this internalized pressure even before she left her job of like, oh my God, I need to be the one to do this. And not just with the getting her out of her work, but also like in buying our house and doing all these things. And because I had this intellectualized pressure, I could not budge. Like no matter what I did, no matter how great the marketing was, like things would just flop and fail. And it was the most frustrating experience. And I think it was about late spring, so not even a year ago. I was sitting in meditation and I was like, guides, come on now. Like I keep showing up for you. I am committed. I am doing the work. Very me, right? Little child having a tantrum, but I was like, me, I'm doing all the things. Why aren't you showing up for me? Like, what the fuck? And the guidance was something to the effect of, you need to stop being so attached to how things are going to play out and start tapping into what it is you actually want to create. So I started thinking about that. And it was around the idea of safety. It was about having my wife back because she wasn't herself when she was anxious and miserable and all these things. And I let go of it having to come from me. This trust piece and this letting go is so hard. It is some of the hardest work that I have done because I've always been someone who's had to be really self-reliant. I grew up really young. So I had to, I was just the doer. And so for them to basically say to me, it doesn't have to come from you. It doesn't have to be like your way of being. And you have to actually stop trying to force divine plan. That letting go was really hard. And it has to be in a state of like true surrender and not giving up, because giving up is like not the frequency of wealth, right? So I find myself in this place and I'm like, okay, we're gonna do this. We're just gonna like, we're going to be open to the fact that maybe it's not going to come from me. And let's see what happens. And then I could start to do things that still felt like I was contributing and I was moving things forward. So like I still worked with like my rituals and I still meditated and I did a lot of inner work, and I actually like uncovered a truth about myself that was like one of the hardest things to ever acknowledge and accept, deeply rooted in shame. And something happened that day. It was like, I want to say end of July last year. And I remember having this thing switch inside me and I was like, oh, that was really gross, but that was really big. And because I had done the releasing work of like the stories and the belief systems, which we're going to talk about next, that were like really in the way of being able to step into this next level, and I let go of having to be the one to control it and that it had to be my way, in those two ways of being, everything changed. And within like, and this is not to say like this is not some kind of promise or guarantee, but literally within a month from that moment, we were millionaires. And it was the most surreal thing that I can ever describe. And it would not have been possible if I hadn't gotten out of the way, because I was just holding on to things so tightly. And I know I remember hearing this metaphor when I was dating, where the idea of like holding sand, if you hold sand super tightly, like it just like falls between your fingers. Like you can't grip sand, whereas you can kind of scoop it and hold it gently. And I think that when we're doing work of calling things in, opportunities, and recalibrating like our own beliefs and our way of being, it's basically saying like, let's loosen the grip on the sand and let's just like keep it open and allow it to come from unexpected places. Does that make sense? Yeah, cool. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to ask? Okay. I'm hydrated. Here we go. So I've called this section Unstick the Stuck. This is talking about like the stories that you've told yourself or that you've been told, the belief systems that you've held onto, some of which have been passed down to you or have been built on these stories and experiences that you've had. And the other one is the patterns of like how you use your time and your energy. And are these things kind of moving you towards this next level of greatness or not? So the things that we were told, and this is why it was so important to have your inner child as an advisor in that previous part, the things that you were told as you were growing up in particular, where you didn't have context, where you didn't have the adult ability to rationalize and to see things in bigger ways, they have a huge impact on how you show up. And this, we often have these conversations around like money mindset. And we're like, if you have these belief systems that like money is the root of all evil, or rich people are assholes, then it's going to really be hard, no matter how much manifestation work you do, to be able to step into those ways of being, because who wants to be evil? Who wants to be an asshole? Like, we're not going to consciously choose to step in that direction. The thing is that a lot of these things are kind of happening behind the scenes. We're not even conscious of the stories that are in the driver's seat, kind of like getting us around in our life. And so when we can actually stop for a second and actually just like take stock of like what the stories that we grew up hearing were, and then to look at them with adult eyes. And with that, to ask ourselves, well, do I believe those things to be true? We then get to start to separate the power of the story and the story itself. Because as soon as we bring consciousness to something, we have the ability to change it and to choose differently. It's when it's going around unchecked that we're in trouble. So if things are true and they're not like in the direction of where you want to go, then you're kind of confronted with this opportunity of like, well, what do I need to change or shift, or work towards changing and shifting? Because let's be honest, some things are not within our control. Like, what is my contribution to being able to make that story untrue? Because this is not the reality that I want to live. And that can be like a pretty big and pretty loaded thing, but it's sort of a necessary step for being able to just like be able to have that separation, that distinction, so that we can no longer be run by our stories and our beliefs. So with that, we're going to just get you to grab your pen and paper. We're going to make a little list. And I want you to be really honest as you're doing this process, not what you should write, but what you truly are feeling and thinking. There's zero judgment here. And if you're worried about someone finding it later, you can tear it up and throw it away. It's totally okay. This is just for you. And I want you to write down what your beliefs are about what it requires of a woman to step into her next level. And does she have to sacrifice? Does she have to work hard? Does she have to prostitute herself? Like, we have all these things, right? So what kind of beliefs do you have going on, or what stories have you heard about what it takes for women to be in like an up-leveled way of being? And with that, what does it take to be a powerful woman? What would it mean to be a woman who finds success easy and effortless? And when you're looking at your list, and we're writing it from a place of truth, not from a place of should, would you say that this list is mostly positive things? Are they negative things? Doesn't really matter. We're just looking for the facts here. No judgment. Now, whether you view them as positive or negative, the next question is, do you have evidence of these things being true? And I'm having this like flashback to the book, He's Just Not That Into You, where they talk about like the exception and the rule. So in the case of dating, we have the story of like how the cheater, my hairdresser's sister's neighbor knew a cheater who then turned out to be the best husband ever. And so, my boyfriend who cheats, it's okay. There's a chance that he's going to turn around and become the best guy ever, when in reality, he's the exception and not the rule. So we want to look at our evidence in that way. So are the things that we're telling ourselves are true, particularly on any of the negative things? Is the evidence that you have of something that you know personally, is that the exception or the rule? Okay. When you're finding yourself in this place of stuckness, where you can like feel your next level, like you're right on the brink of it, it's like almost an itchiness inside you because you're just so eager to move on, but you're just stuck. It's really important that we do this work of having the awareness of what is playing out for you, whether it's a story or a belief, and how you've justified that story and belief unconsciously, because we don't want to be wrong. Of course, we want to look for evidence that what we think and believe is true. But we need to have awareness of what that is so that we can unhook the story from how we're able to choose and act and be. Now, the last thing that we have in terms of our stuckness that is really important is how you are spending your time, what your routines are, your patterns, how you're living your life, essentially. And so the first question, of course, is what you're doing moving you towards your next level? Or are you working so hard and giving so much that you're burnt out, and at the end of the day, the only thing you can do is scroll on social media or watch Netflix and eat ice cream? No judgment. Now, those things, those behaviors are not, that's energy that you're not channeling in towards your next level self. But the goal isn't like, oh, I should shame myself for doing these behaviors. The goal is, what do I need to change in my life so that at the end of the day, I'm not so fucking burnt out, so that I have energy and time to be able to dedicate to my next level desire. I have here a note that says you can't embody two truths at the same time. And I would say that that is most obvious, at least for me, in my experience, it was most obvious after I had immediately had this massive up level. But I was so used to doing things in a way that was really burnt out, that was really unsupported, that where I felt like I had to do everything by myself, and it had to be hard. Like, I was someone who was resilient. I was someone who had overcome. So who the fuck was I to suddenly have things be easy, to suddenly get help? When I hired Cassie, oh my gosh, I cannot tell you like how hard that was for me to say, I can't do this all by myself anymore. I think I was like 7 or 8 years into business when I finally hired some help. And in doing so, I then was able to take the stuff I was doing and like make it reach so much further, because it wasn't just me anymore. Because you're just one person. But so long as you're holding on to energies, stories, or beliefs that are tied in this one way of being that you are right now, when you step into your next level self, you've kind of got like one foot in each world. And so it's really hard to not just actually embody and like step into that frequency, but to even enjoy the newness that is available to you now and the possibility that's open. Because now you can get help and things can be easy, but you have a story that like you need it to be hard for it to be worthwhile. So now this old way of being and this new way of being are in conflict with each other, and we can't do that. You have to kind of, it's like, it sounds harsh, but you got to pick a team. You got to pick a side of the fence you're going to stand on. You can't have one foot in each level. One of the books that I'm working on right now is Atomic Habits by James Clear, I think is who it is. And he had this statement in it that I was like, oh shit, I need to write this down for this class. And it was, improvements are temporary until they become who you are. So we have to look at what our habits are and how, and not just our habits, but also how we spend our time and what needs to be like rejigged, recalibrated, what boundaries need to be set, what things need to be let go lovingly, so that we have the time and energy to dedicate to the next level and the things that's going to take for us to be able to step into that space. Does that make sense? So weird having this like one-way conversation. Makes sense, Donna says. Okay, I got my thumbs up. Does anybody have any questions before we move into the next part?
I do have one.
Let's do it.
Keep it on here, but like my audio is cutting a bit, so maybe I need to turn it off. So I really relate to what you said about being a bit on one side and the other and kind of being conflicted. It kind of feels, at least for me, like going back and forth, because sometimes it feels like everything has changed, and the moment after you are rethinking about how it was before and still feeling the same. And I know it's baby steps, but what's your personal experience on how to overcome that, or how to actually not get frustrated with the process?
So there's two parts. The first is grief, and actually like letting go of the person that you were and the ways that you did things, and loving that. So it's not letting it go like, oh yeah, I'm over you, I'm like so better than this now. It's not about that at all. It's like, this person got me this far. This version of me, you know, has allowed me to step into this new way of being, and I'm so grateful for her, but I can't think and feel and behave in the way that I did to be able to be in this new space. The second is to not expect that the next space is suddenly like this light switch that goes off where you're just like, oh, and everything is fine. Actually, Cassie can attest to this. She and I were in a meeting where I got a quote for my new Facebook ads person. And I was like, oh, like I almost threw up, because I was like, I am not used to investing in that way, because it was still relatively new. And she was like, are you going to do it? I was like, yep, but I got to just let it feel gross first. And we need to kind of be willing to be in that discomfort, because there are some people who are going to step into the new level. They're going to get pushback from like what this new level is asking of them. And they're going to go run back to that old way of being. And if you've got one foot in the old way of being, that's really easy to do. But if you can just sit there and be like, oh, and it's going to feel like you just got punched in the gut and you're like, this feels super gross and I kind of want to yak. And then you just sit with it and you're like, okay. And like, for me, I literally had to let it be a body thing first, and then let it get to my head of, this is the game we're playing now. This is the level that we're at, and this is the way we have to invest. And then suddenly that just made it easier. But I think if I had tried to go right to intellectualizing it, it wouldn't have worked. Like I had to actually sit in the grossness. And we have to be willing to be uncomfortable in those shifts. Because, I mean, I think the way I articulated this the other day was that when we're like, personal growth, like really deep transformation is like this regular death and rebirth cycle. And so we can't, like, this is why you can't have one foot in and one foot out, because you can't die and live at the exact same time, right? Like one part of you is letting go for the new part to come in. And so doing so is just asking for more stuckness, I guess. But did that answer your question? I feel like I kind of talked in circles a bit, but yeah. It is, Donna says that's such a great example. Do you mean the Facebook ads part?
No, just the whole way you told that story around, you know, if you keep one foot in the past, it's, once it gets scary, and it will get scary, it's just so easy to keep retreating, contracting. I feel like it's a contraction almost.
It 100% is. And oftentimes with clients, when they're like, well, how do I know? Like, how do I know if things are the right thing or the wrong thing? And I love to do like the expansion and contraction exercise, which is like, okay, if you tune into it and the energy in your gut at the same time, does it feel really open? Like, did you suddenly lean back and your shoulders opened up and you're like, ah, oh, yeah, that feels like the best stretch ever? Or did you go like, and if you went like I did with the Facebook ads, it's okay, am I contracting because this is new and unfamiliar? Or am I contracting because this is a fuck no and you need to run in the other direction? And that little discernment can be a bit tricky, but I feel like the more work you do in actually like being with your energy and recognizing like how you react to things and how you show up in the world, it becomes a lot easier to be like, I'm getting in my own way again, rather than, oh no, this is like run for the hills. Because they kind of immediately will show up very similarly and it can be really tricky. I've often described this as being like this like super sleuth of like your own self. You have to become a detective of your own psyche and way of being. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay. Okay. When we were in this state where we have done this work of bringing in clarity and where we have kind of done like the energetic housekeeping of our patterns, our beliefs, and the stories that we tell ourselves or that we've been told about like what it means to even be an up-leveled woman, and you know, we've decided to overcome and be very audaciously bold to just claim that for ourselves. We are now starting to operate from a bit of a different frequency. And you will start to recognize this woman because she is what I would call unfuckwithable. You know that there is just like this unshakable certainty in how she's navigating the world, where when she's confronted with things that like project onto her, I always use the expression she's Teflon. It just like slides right off because she's not taking on other people's projections as truth, where she's really boundaried, where she's just able to carve out the space that she needs, and she does it unapologetically. There's no like, well, I'm sorry, but it's like, I'm not available. And she actually like honors her yes and honors her no in really big ways. And once you start to be in this place, there is something that really shifts and change, because you've now stepped into a place where you have decided that you're worthy, and not just intellectually decided. It's like a full being like, hell yeah, I am worth doing the things that I want. I am worth stepping into this way. I am willing to give myself permission for it to be fun and easy and joyous. It's no longer permission as like the ease and the grace that I used to talk about before, because that's important, but like this is like next level. It's not just like this passive thing. It is ownership and sovereignty. And it's like, I feel like queen energy, if that makes sense. And when you're in that space, you are magnetic. You're magnetic not just to your desires, but you are magnetic to like the opportunities that are going to be able to like deepen that experience of that energy, because you've done this, that work of the energetic house cleaning. So the sort of patterns and beliefs that even people that would maybe like try to drag you down into those old ways of being, or worse, like anything out of this up-leveled state, you just don't have that same connection to it. The pull isn't there. The desire isn't even there. Like you can look at that, and even when it's like people or things that you used to feel really fondly about, you'll still feel the affection, you'll still feel fond, but you won't feel the pull. It's very much like, this is the trajectory. This is the way we're going. We're not turning the car around. This is where we're headed. When I started doing this work on myself 15 years ago, it was trial and error, and nobody actually broke these things down for me. So it's a very clumsy, awkward, uncomfortable process, like a lot of the times, which is why I put this workshop together. Because when you're in a state where you are actually consciously creating, things aren't just like happening to you. Like I know I use the example of like the money stuff with us. We might have like woken up millionaires, but we consciously created the things to get to that point in the first place, right? When you're consciously creating your up level, you're basically doing the work of building the bridge of where you are now, or where you were, to this other side. You're not being teleported there. It's not Star Trek. You're not being beamed up, Scotty, and dropped back down. It is like you are choosing, you are the architect, the designer, the builder. It is you. And you're going to have other supports. You're going to have people who are like doing the work and helping you build the bridge. And sometimes those work, the supports are not actually outside of yourself. They're people like your highest self and your inner child that you're going to call in to be able to do this kind of inner architecture and design. But you are consciously creating this reality. It's not just happening to you. You are an active participant. You are not passive here at all. You are not sitting in the sidecar while something else is driving you to your next level. You are like revving the engine and you're on your way. And so when you are stepping into this and you are making this conscious choice, and none of this is happening by accident, you are asked to step into territory that is completely unfamiliar. And unless you are surrounded by people who have been there before, and I certainly wasn't, you're definitely in some new depths, some new waters. You're looking for a flashlight, you're looking for a scuba guide. And it can be really tricky and it can be really scary. And that's also going to rob some of that joy, because now all of that certainty that you cultivated in the clarity part is like gone. Now it's actually still there, but we don't have access to it because we get caught up in like the fear and the apprehension and the unknown. But you can keep coming back to it and you can keep cultivating these tools within yourself. You can keep asking these questions. You can hire people and work with them to be able to support you into your next level. You can read the books and do the workshops. You can meditate the shit out of it, right? Like these are things that are like, again, you're consciously choosing it. It's not happening to you. So there's different tactics that you can use and everyone's approach is going to be different, but you are consciously choosing. And I know I keep coming back to that and I'm harping on it because I feel like our autonomy and our agency is so important when we are creating a sovereign life. It is, our free will is one of the most beautiful gifts that have been given to us. It can also be like one of the most frustrating things, because when you want to make a decision and you don't know what to choose, you're like, oh, free will, decision paralysis, yuck. But it is essential to our humanity. It is what our soul came here to experience. It's why we came in as humans and not some other life form. Okay, so we're going to do another exercise. I'll get you to close your eyes or soften your gaze, whatever feels comfortable. Take a nice deep breath. And we're going to go back to that heart space because it feels like a really nice little cocoon to be in today. The chamber of the heart's truth. And we are going to invite into this space your next level self. I want you to take a moment to just take her in. How is she different from you? What's her energy and her vibe like? Or can you even see a difference? Does she just feel like where you are right now? And does she have the confidence and the clarity to know what to do next? And I want you to imagine that even though you were these two separate entities, you are also two halves of the same whole. So you're going to step towards each other and slowly you're going to meld so that there is no longer a distinction. She is you, you are her. And owning that, owning her, feeling her within you. What shifts, what changes? What are the sensations that you're getting? Do any immediate thoughts come to mind where you're like, oh, I hadn't really considered things like that? Or, whew, where did that come from? I want you to just be in this moment so that you can feel the frequency of the up level. And so that you can recognize that this is already here for you. And when you can feel it and know it in this way, where it is literally inside of you, vibrating at a particular frequency, where you can start to recognize what that feels like. And when you encounter opportunities or events or things that come across your way, feel into them. And you can have a little gut check of like, okay, does that feel like the frequency of an up level? Is this moving me towards my next level self? And so if you, as this melded being, can lay down on your back in your mind's eye, and you're just staring up at the stars, It's a beautiful night sky. It's the middle of the afternoon here, but let's just go with it. So in your mind's eye, you are lying on your back in the chamber of your heart's truth, and you're looking up at the stars. And there are some stars that are going to twinkle a little bit brighter than others. And these ones are tied to different true desires. So recognize which ones they are. Out of all the stars in the sky, which are the ones that are the twinkliest? And of those twinkly ones, which are the ones that are calling out to you right now? And you might be able to recognize it and be like, that one is security, and that one is love, that one is acceptance and belonging. Or they might just be like random twinkly stars, and that's totally okay too. You don't have to intellectualize it. But for the ones that are the most demanding of your attention, they're standing out so brightly, you're going to invite them to come down from the skies and pull into your heart. And then there's also the sensations involved with that. So now you have this new shift in frequency when you've melded with the energy of your up-leveled self. And now you've called in these next level desires. So how does that change your inner landscape? What's different? What's more noticeable? When you're ready, come on back. You can jot anything down in your journal that you want to make sure that you capture. Is anyone comfortable sharing what they were calling in? Zero pressure.
The first thought, joy was the first twinkly star, and the second was community. And community was like, became this cluster of a whole bunch of stars that just, yeah. So those two.
Strange question. Were they far from each other in the sky?
No, they were right beside each other. Like my sky was very, very small.
They feel very entwined for me. Like,
yeah.
Like I feel like you can get joy in other ways, of course, but my feeling is that this community that you're calling in is deeply entrenched in joy for you.
I think this is true. Yes. Yeah.
That's cool. How did it feel to have that within you?
It took me, well, that was interesting because entwining the two was a really like strangling kind of feeling in my chest. But bringing in the joy in the community kind of like made it settle into a back to breathing again. So yeah, that was pretty powerful.
That makes a lot of sense. And so what I would, if it's okay for me to make a suggestion,
of course,
after the call, I would invite you to actually, I know this is awful, but go back to the strangling feeling for a moment, because that's resistance. And just ask it like, what's gripping me right now? Whether it's a fear or belief or whatever that is, a story. What's gripping me? Okay, great. What does that need? Often those things that are causing us to contract are looking for validation or reassurance. They just want to be heard. They just want to be noticed. They're not actually like trying to sabotage us and like ruin our lives. It sometimes has that effect if we don't sit down and have a conversation with it. But when we can dialogue with the resistance and say, okay, great. Well, why are you even here? Like, what's your purpose? Then we start to have like more cognizance of like, okay, this is the next level. This is the next thing I have to heal. Or this is where I need to direct some time, attention, meditation, whatever. So what starts out as like a really strong discomfort ends up being like a light shone into the darkness at like that one part that has gone undiscovered so far. Welcome. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to share or any questions you'd like to ask? No. Let me just make sure there isn't anything going in the chat. No, okay, good. Okay. So these are kind of the three big areas that I see, and these are of course general, and it's different when I'm working with a client one-on-one, but these are the three kind of core areas that I feel are really important for us to not just be able to step into our next level self, but to actually like leap into it, get there faster, and do it with a whole lot more ease. So if this was something that you would like to explore and have some help with, my work is not for everybody. So I'm just going to make that really crystal clear. So the people who resonate most with my work have been on their path for a little while. They're not super green and brand new. And the reason for this is not a judgment of the journey, because I feel like we all need to start somewhere, but sometimes we go into some really deep and hard places that can be a little bit mind-blowing. And so we want to have someone who has a little bit of a foundation of what inner work looks like and some healing that has already taken place. So those superficial layers have already kind of come off. This is for somebody who also really wants to be in their power. They don't want to defer their power. They don't want to have me provide them all the answers. I actually do not provide answers. My job, I feel, is very much about asking the questions that are going to help you access the things that are already within you, because you already know what is next. Sometimes you just need someone who's going to come and like shine the light in those places, because you don't actually know where the places are and you don't have the light handy. That's my job. Working with me is a 5-figure investment. So I know that that is also not for everybody. And also my one-on-one work is very different than my group work. Some people are very social learners and social creatures, and they need to be in those kind of containers with other people on the journey with them. Whereas one-on-one, I am there with you. We are in the trenches. We are locked arm in arm, and I am committed to this vision for you, that I'm always looking out for your highest self. And that is a very different experience. You're not doing it alone, but you're not doing it surrounded by your peers. And so it's really about tuning into your heart and finding out like what is actually the best type of support for the way that I grow and the way that I learn. And I think that one last thing is it needs to be somebody who is really ready for this type of growth. We can't have, you can be stuck, but you can't be committed to your stuckness, if that makes sense. So you want to be able to have that fire inside, to have that knowing, that tingling of like, shit, I'm so close, I can feel it, and be able and ready and willing to actually take the leap. I'm not going to take you somewhere that I haven't gone before myself. I've gone some pretty funky places. I promise I will make it as gentle on you as you can. And I really feel that working together is a true partnership. So if that is something that you're interested in, Cassie's going to pop the link to the application in the chat for you. It's a pretty short application. It'll just give us a little kind of basis of where you are at right now, and if working together is going to be the best next natural step for you. Does anybody have any questions? Sorry for the hammering. My street is under construction and it's very loud. I don't know if my mic's picking it up, but. Okay. If there are no questions, that's totally good. If something pops in after, as you're kind of marinating and integrating everything that we've looked at today, hop into my DMs, you know where to find me, or send me an email. And just know that the things that we have uncovered today are just the beginning. And now that you have this awareness, you now have the ability to make some really powerful changes and transformations on the next step of your evolution. So that's that. Okay, my darlings, no matter where you are in the world, I hope this finds you having a beautiful rest of your day.